Hey, today we welcome in Mike Stanton, brand new co-host right here on Bleav in Astros.
What's up, Astros fans?
This game is turned upside down!
Welcome to the Bleav in Astros podcast, your home for all things Astros, with your host, sports writer and native Houstonian, Jeff Balke. Now, direct from H-Town, here's Jeff Balke.
What is up, Astros fans? Welcome to episode 108 of the Bleav in Astros podcast on the Bleav Podcasting Network. I'm Jeff Balke, and happy to welcome my new co-host, Southpaw, MLB Network analyst and Astros broadcaster, Mike Stanton. Mike, how are you today, buddy? Welcome.
Jeff, I'm doing great, man. Regular season's right around the corner. Spring training seems like it's lasted forever. But
it has.
Yeah, we're what, just a few days away, a week away
from 9
days?
10 days, something like that. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's such a short off season when you go that deep into the playoffs. And I mean, for fans, it's great. I'm sure for players, it's probably, I mean, you've been on some teams that had some very short off seasons. What were your impressions of the short off? Was it good or
really
bad?
Bothered me. I think it's more mindset than anything else. If you think it's a short off season, it's going to be a short off season. But I was blessed enough to play in 11 straight postseasons. And it all started at the beginning of my career. So it was kind of just like the norm. But, it was just one of those things that I didn't, to tell you the truth, I really didn't take, especially when I was younger, I didn't take a lot of time off. I went right into, working out or doing whatever. This is, you have to remember, this is back in the 90s when I even started before even the workout craze started. Actually, Jeff, when I signed with the Atlanta Braves in 1987, they actually told me to not ever lift a weight. Because my body type, I was going to bulk up. Because you got to remember, back then, if you lifted like a football
ever
player.
Lift away.
And yeah, they knew I would just balloon up. So they said, don't lift anything. Oh, how times have changed.
They're like, plyo what metrics? Right. I know. It is funny when you think about that kind of stuff because, I'm from the same generation. And when I was a kid in high school playing sports, if you were playing like basketball or like I did or whatever, if you're playing baseball, there was no really lifting. You'd run a lot. There's a lot of running. There was a lot of throwing. There was a lot of like drills, but nobody got in the weight. Only the football guys were really in there pounding
Jeff,
it.
That's what I was. I grew up in West Texas. I went to Midland High School. I mean, I lived Friday Night Lights.
Friday Night Lights, yeah.
Football was really my first love. And, it all worked out pretty well with the career I ended up having. But, that was one of those things. I played baseball. Now listen, it's not that I didn't like baseball, but I loved the lights. I loved playing under the lights on Friday night. And back then, you got to remember, there was no spring football. There was no 7-on-7. Right. There was none of that kind of stuff. Football was a seasonal sport, and you were out of season. So, strapped on the spikes and played baseball.
What was your position in football?
I was a running back. I played in the defensive secondary, weak side linebacker, that kind of thing. Kind of moved around some. Wasn't the biggest back then, 5'10", 5'11", maybe 170 pounds, but could run a little bit, was a little bit of an athlete. So, but that was, man, one of the movies that if it's ever on Friday Night Lights, I always watch it, and it sends chills up and down my spine because I kind of lived it.
Did you ever read the book? Really great book.
I didn't read the book.
Really good.
I know that the book did not come out. When it did come out, the city of Odessa did not react very well to it whatsoever.
No, they didn't care for it. Well, look, the book is not a fiction. It's a nonfiction book. It's a real fascinating peek inside of all. Of course, I love the TV series.
I watch that too.
It's funny.
I've partaken in all of it.
You probably knew a Buddy Garrity. And you probably, you probably knew a few people like that. Sure. I can imagine. That's pretty fascinating. Like you, the weights were not a thing. When I remember the weight room at my high school, I went to a little high school, and the weight room there was just inside of like a storage area, and there was like no lights,
right.
and guys that are in there in the dark lifting weights. It was so weird. So yeah, a little different now. So now that we are in sort of the I don't want to call it the final third, let's say, of spring training, we're starting to see a little bit of the Astros, what had been a strength, really, and what we thought was going to be a strength this offseason, their starting rotation. We're starting to see some cracks there early on. Now, it's early. It's a long season. Sure. If there's anything that baseball will teach you, it's to be patient. But Justin Verlander is going to miss a couple of weeks. I'm not real concerned about him. He just came in a little bit behind. JP France is close, but they're not sure if he's going to be quite ready for his first turn through the rotation, certainly by his second turn. Now you've got Jose Urquidy out with a forearm strain. What is it like? It feels like to me, all of a sudden, we've gone from this position where like, how are we going to get all these guys in a starting rotation to like, where are we going to get our starters from?
Jeff, this is what happens. As soon as you think, oh, yeah, we're good, we have enough pitching, something like this happens. And, not saying that has anything to do with Jose Urquidy last year, but you got to remember, he went down with a shoulder injury. We didn't really know much about it, and he missed 3 months. That's kind of how these things can flare up. And we really don't have any additional information on Jose. I think it's going to take a little time for things to calm down and then figure out. It's going to take a few days off, then he's going to play catch. That's when they're going to figure out exactly what the time frame is going forward. JP France, the thing is, it's good to see him back. I think he's going to be there, even if he's not able to go out there and give them 100 pitches, just simply because the schedule is not their friend. Early in the season.
You're
they played
right.
20 out of the first 21 days.
I think it's 21 out of 22. It's crazy.
Yankees. I know. Major League Baseball kind of is throwing the Astros right into the fire.
They sure are. I think it started last year like that too.
Water. But we make this big deal. We make this big deal about opening day. And it is a big deal because the season is started. But for the players, it's really just one of 162. And that's why I'm glad that they pulled back the reins on JV so that he doesn't try and force himself to be ready for opening day. He's fine. There's nothing going on with him. There's no aches and pains. You're just talking about a guy that's 40 plus years old and they want to take it easy.
Yeah, and I absolutely no real reason to blame anybody for that. And listen, like you said, it feels like a bigger deal because it's the beginning of the season. But really what you want is people to be healthy towards the end of the season. The Astros are going to be good this year. They've got so much offense. They're going to be, I think they're going to be better defensively this year because last year they had a little bit of a down year defensively. I am curious, though. I'm not worried about JV. I'm not worried about JP France. Urquidy's interesting, though. If somebody pointed this out to me on Twitter, and I can't remember who it was that did it, but I do appreciate it. I pointed out that it was good news that he was just going to rest, and it didn't seem like it was a serious deal. They pointed out that we heard the same thing from Justin Verlander in 2020, and we heard the same thing from Lance McCullers last year. It's like, it's just a strain. I'm just going to be out a little bit. And the next thing you know, they're gone for the season. Right. Like you said, these are things that can flare up and you just don't know.
Well, and it's one of it puts butterflies in my stomach every time I hear of a pitcher going down with any kind of flexor strain, any, elbow soreness, some inflammation. I can't get loose because so many times it comes out to Tommy John surgery. And I'm not saying that's what's going to happen to Jose, and we've got our fingers crossed that that's not the case.
Right.
But it just history tells us that, that's the road you're going down. Now, the unfortunate thing for Jose was that he was actually throwing the ball really well this spring.
He really was
moving the ball around. I thought the velocity was good. It hit the command of his off speed stuff. And then he just, he came out, I think he had thrown about 45 pitches. Yeah. And he took himself out on the way to 60. And he took himself out. So, maybe this is just a hiccup. Maybe this is just, he takes a little bit of time off. There's always extra aches and pains in spring training. Heck, there were times I had 2 or 3 spring trainings in a row. I got a cortisone shot in my shoulder just to kind of get over the hump. Never missed any time and went at it. So they don't do that quite as much as they used to. They take a little bit more, especially the Astros are extremely conservative in these type situations, because you know what their theory is. It's pretty simple. Better to take a couple weeks now than a couple months later.
Yeah. And they're right. And also, there is this whole new, there's been stories written about the sort of science and the mechanics behind pitching now, and that the high spin rates and the extra exertion that they take to throw balls hard every single time, that it just takes a toll on guys more than it probably did in the past when you weren't trying to throw hard on every single pitch.
We go down this rabbit hole, Jeff, and obviously I have very strong feelings about this.
I'm sure you do.
There was no select baseball. There was no, I didn't really even pitch till I got in college. And then even in college, I didn't pitch that much. I think that's one of the reasons why I was able to last so long, with all the pitches that are thrown at the amateur level, starting from like 12 years old on, all the travel, all the, single sport athletes, all that kind of stuff, when a baseball player is in his teens, early teens and mid teens, he's still developing. He's not anywhere near where the final product is going to be. That's one of the reasons why we say a baseball player's prime is, 26 to 30, is because 26 is when we finally fully develop as a male human being. The guys that are doing the crazy stuff in their mid 20s, they're still not got all their man muscles.
Man muscles is my new word. I'm going to be using that all the time. Well, it is interesting you talk about that too, because while we do have these kinds of, issues with the starting rotation, look, they were in pursuit of Blake Snell, and the deal is San Francisco signed him $62 million over 2 years with a first-year opt-out. The first thing I thought was, y'all go ahead. Yeah. Because listen, Blake Snell's very good, but Blake Snell has never strung together two back-to-back great years. And, and so
he's only had two good years, period.
Right. And to give
all the other years north of 4.5.
And to give a guy $30 million plus a season and allow him to walk away after one, I'm good with that. Well, there's still some guys out there, and we'll see.
The only chance. It was going to be a 2-year deal, and if Jim Crane decided to go down that route, to tell you the truth, let him go. Because listen, if he opts out, that means he had a good season. Right. And that means you're not on the hook for another $31 million next year. So
that's a good point.
That opt out is actually for both sides. It's not just for Blake Snell. It's for the Giants also, because now they're not on the hook for that. And obviously then they have a chance, if they want to bring him back. But you have to remember, both of those two Cy Young years the 2 good years he had, he won Cy Young both years. He threw right at 180 innings both times. His highest inning total in any other season's like 155, and he only did that once. So he's not an innings eater. When he's good, but there's just no mediocrity. He's either, not very good or he's really good.
Yeah, it's feast or famine. So I'm totally good with them. So they'll fill from within. Sure. That means basically, I think it's mainly going to be Ronel Blanco and Brandon Bielak. I think Brandon Bielak primarily because he has had more starts. I also think, frankly, Blanco has a chance to be a valuable member of the bullpen this year. Yeah. He's a guy that you can stretch to 2 or 3 innings without real problem. He's got really good stuff. I think he could be the bridge guy that they need to get to their last 3. The interesting thing to me is, are we going to see, even if it's early in the year, will we see some Spencer Arrighetti? Will he make it into the into the 26 man? Because you've got 2 guys on the IL. He's pitched really well this spring. He's basically checked off all the boxes you can get to. He's going to spend some time in AAA for sure. But I just wonder, given where we are, has he earned the right maybe to come in there and take some of those rotation spots?
Well, I think he's going to get the opportunity. I don't think it's going to be out of spring training. There are pressures that come with that. Even if you try and take the pressure off of the player, some of it is situational. Some of it is self-imposed, but let him go down, let him get his feet grounded in the regular season, let him throw the ball, have 2 or 3 good starts, and then if you need him, fine. The Astros would love to hold off, not start that time, not start that clock, his
They
service
always
clock,
do.
all that kind of stuff, all the business side of baseball that you know, we all love. That's sarcasm, by the way. But
no doubt.
I think you would really like to try and stay away from them. But, you know, how many times do guys get called up out of necessity? Actually, that's usually how it works.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right about that. It's interesting to me because it brings up a topic for me that I'm curious to get your thoughts on. Bleav is one of two guys that are on the 40-man roster who the Astros who are out of options. Right. He's one. John Singleton is the other. I'm not sure either one of them is necessarily 26-man worthy for a team like the Astros. Like Bleav, I can understand because he can go back and forth from the bullpen to starting. But I do wonder about a guy like John Singleton, who really all he does is DH and play first base. He's a left-handed power bat who frankly hasn't hit that well since they picked him up last year off waivers. I almost kind of question would he clear waivers if you put him on them? I'm not sure. Yeah. He could and then be outrighted to AAA. But I do sort of wonder about how that puts sort of the Astros in an awkward position of saying, well, we kind of have to keep these guys on the 26-man, or we're going to have to possibly let them go.
Yeah, I think Singleton. It's going to be tough for him to make 26. Okay, I just, you know, there's just not enough versatility. There's not enough contact. We know the dude's got huge power. He had one of the biggest at bats in the postseason last year for the Astros that ended up being a walk. We know he's got a good eye.
Definitely,
it's just simply not enough contact. And that's a big problem. And him being, you know, keyholed into just first base, I think that's also an issue.
Yeah.
Bleav, I'm going to be shocked if Bleav doesn't make the 26.
Yeah, I'm too.
Because of his versatility and because of the state of the pitching staff right now, that you just
completely,
you know, you need an arm, a guy that's done it before, a guy that's going to give you innings.
You're definitely right about that. I do sort of look at this bench and kind of think about it to myself and think, you know, we know Mauricio Duvon and we know Victor Caratini. There's really only two other spots. And, you know, they want a lefty. That's the biggest thing. If John Singleton isn't that guy, I mean, who's next? You know, I think they thought they would bring Trey Cabbage in and be that guy, but he hasn't really been that guy in spring training. So you kind of wonder who's going to end up with those last two bench spots.
Well, you know, the other side of this also is those young players, Loperini, you know, these guys, you want these guys to play every day. You know, you don't want them to come up and set the bench. Yeah. So I think, you know, they probably start off in the minor leagues, let them play every day, let them get into the groove. And then when you need them somewhere in the regular season, you know, we talked about it earlier about, you know, coming up due to necessity. That's how it works. But I don't think you want to take one of your, you know, top prospects and sit him on the bench and he's going to play, you know, a couple days a week. You'd rather him play every day in the minor leagues and, you know, let him find his swing, let him find his confidence. And then when something does happen, you know, somebody does get hurt or somebody needs to take a break or whatever, then you can bring him up and let him get his at-bats.
Well, apparently Loperfido is a pretty good cook too, so they might want to just bring. He apparently makes a mean paella.
Yes, I heard that.
So I'll take it. That seems like a good plan. Are you a big cook, Mike?
Curious. I am not a big cook. No,
no, not so much. I love to cook, man. So
I can do some barbecuing, but other than that, not so much.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so we're with this week plus left of spring training. What are guys working on right now? Like we know in the beginning, they're like, when do they cease to test things out? And like, you know, like we know Fromberg tried calling some of his own pitches early on. We know guys try out new pitches that they probably won't show during the regular season. With this last sort of the third of spring training, what are guys working on right now leading up to opening day?
Well, now it's, you know, you spend a lot of spring training just kind of treading water, you know, not trying to build too soon, not trying to peak before the regular season starts. But this last 10 days, 9 days, the last week of spring training, it actually goes very quickly because you have to remember there's a lot of off the field stuff that's happening also. Guys are moving. You got to make sure your car there's just anything you can think of. These guys are thinking of also. and it makes for a very hectic time, to close out wherever you're living in spring training. Where's my family going? What's my living condition going to be when I get to wherever I'm going? So it's a very daunting time, of spring training this last week or so. And then you also have the baseball aspect of it. These guys are going to start playing more. They're going to be on the field. They're going to get their 3 or 4 at-bats now. They're going to play back-to-back days, So there's a lot of things that go on here at the end of spring training that makes that last week a whirlwind.
I can imagine. Like, I hadn't really thought about the personal aspect that much, but you're right. I mean, they've spent more than a month, in Florida.
Oh, sure.
I would imagine, at least for most of the guys, they're going to end up back here because even if they're not playing in at the major league level, they're either going to be at Corpus or they're going to be in Sugar Land. So at least it's a little closer to town. But still, yeah, that's a lot of stuff to do. Who do you think of all of these guys? Who do you think is poised this year to see the biggest breakout? Because we've seen, you look around at some of the players on this team and you look at some of the rotation and all. There's a number of guys that seem like they could have big years, or maybe not. But I'm wondering who you think might end up having a breakout year this year.
Well, I think there's a few. I think for you have to look at the top of the rotation. Say Fromber, after an uneven year last year, can he bounce back? Same thing with Christian Javier. Javier was really good at the beginning of the season. I think it was July and August. He was not good at all. Bregman finally has had a healthy offseason. He's had a good spring. He's also a free agent, so he's poised to have a good season. But I think you also have to look to center field, and you have to look at Jake Meyers. They said Jake Meyers is going to be the center fielder. They said it back in December. And, he's going to get the first shake, and he's going to get a long look as long as he's healthy. I think it's a big year to figure out, is Jake Meyers an everyday player, or is he a platoon guy? So I think that's the short list. There's obviously a lot more guys that you're going to look at. Same with, you say the same thing about Jeremy Pena as you did Bregman. A mediocre year last year. Even his first year, he was good. He wasn't great. He wasn't great till he got to the postseason.
Right.
So the left side of the infield, those guys are going to have to step it up, and especially with the state of the pitching staff. Yeah. There's going to be more pressure on the bullpen. And you're going to need some runs. You're going to need some runs until you get all your horses back in that rotation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested to watch. Obviously, the one guy I think a lot of people are going to be looking at is Yainer Diaz, simply because it's just going to be his first full year behind the dish. I think Christian Javier has a real chance to have a big year this year. I think maybe last year people were predicting that he was going to have a big year, but I think it was early for him. He had pitched in the baseball classic. I think that hurt him a little bit. Plus, it was his first time he had ever thrown that many innings in his career. I think this year he'll probably be a little more prepared for it. I spoke to somebody. I haven't been down to spring training this year, but I spoke to a couple of people who said that he looks like he got bigger.
Yeah, he rededicated himself. There were questions last year, especially in the second half. Where were his legs underneath him? What kind of shape was he in? He worked hard this offseason. I think you can tell this spring. He started yesterday, and you looked at it. Yeah, he had he gave up 5 earned runs in 4 2/3. Right. He gave up all those in the 5th inning. It was raining.
Yeah, exactly.
He airmailed a couple balls completely to the backstop, which he doesn't usually do.
No.
But the first couple innings, he threw the ball well. So I think you're right. I think he's poised, to find that swing and miss. That was really the biggest problem.
Yes.
Him in that second half was that his strikeout to walk ratio went almost to 1-to-1. And he's always been a guy that has gotten a lot of swing and miss, and he just simply couldn't get the hitters to miss a pitch.
Well, his invisible became visible. I mean, that was part of the problem. All of a sudden, guys could see a pitch they never could see before, and when that happens, that's going to be a problem. So yeah, right. I'm looking forward to seeing how he does. One other note that I wanted to pass by you and get your thoughts on. Apparently, the Major League Baseball Players Association is having a little infighting. I don't know if you've read about this, but there have been many calls to get rid of Bruce Meyer, who is their second in command. And apparently the reason behind this is a lot of the middle of the road guys, not the big stars or anything like that, are annoyed because they feel like Scott Boras has too much power over the players union. Now, to me, I find this whole thing sort of fascinating because I'm sure Scott Boras does have a lot of power. I mean, when you command the careers of some of the biggest names in all of sports, never mind baseball, that's going to happen. But I can't imagine if I were a rank and file guy, if I'm not somebody who's commanding $20 or $30 million a year, I might be a little annoyed at them pushing a certain way about it. I know it's very different from your era, but from your perspective, how do you think this affects guys that are playing the game every single day?
Well, it's not really that different. Now, we didn't have, Scott Boras was around back then, but he didn't have the stable of players that he does now. It's not just the top players. He's got just so many players that he represents.
Right.
It does pose a problem, but, this has been an issue, going all the way back into the 80s, that the middle class of Major League Baseball, not the superstar players, not the rookies. It's the guys in the middle that have 5-6 years in. They have always been the ones that have been on the short side of salaries and also on jobs. I mean, we're you're seeing organizations. This has been going on. This is nothing new. This has been going on for quite a while, decade plus. That they would rather put a rookie in a position than a veteran guy and pay him 2 or 3 times what the rookie is. And it actually makes fiscal sense.
Sure,
doesn't necessarily make sense in the clubhouse and on the bench and in the game itself, but that's where the business side of baseball clashes with the sport itself.
Right.
But the players union, 750 plus people, and they're not all going to agree. Everybody's in a different spot. Everybody's got a voice in the players union. So we'll have to see what ends up coming of that. But I don't know how you can stop a Scott Boras. You're just going to tell him, hey, you can't have as many players? I don't think you could do that.
It's so interesting to me too, because it is this whole, I mean, this is happening in lots of industries. It's happening in just a world in general, is that there is a caving out of the sort of middle ground.
Sure.
I've been a musician for, the most of my life. I was a professional musician for a long time. And one of the things you see in the music industry now is that the regular working musician guys are basically gone from the music industry. People are replacing them with technology. And certainly you're seeing AI now starting to replace things. So there are people that have been in that middle ground where it's been like, oh, we could make a decent living. We weren't getting rich or anything else, but we're doing all right. That's eroding, I think, for a lot of people. So it doesn't really surprise me that it's happening in baseball too. So I think it'd be fascinating to follow, frankly.
Yeah. I mean, this has been going on in baseball and internally, the Players Association, the representatives, everybody talks about it, but it just really hasn't been out there in the public.
Yeah.
And it's, like I said, this has been going on for decades. I mean, even going back when I started, there was still that, that scuttlebutt about, what's happening to the middle player, when one generation moves on to let the next generation ends, what happens to those players that linger. And it's kind of crazy. You got somebody like Nelson Cruz, who has played so long and has been so good.
Yeah.
He's kind of the outlier. Most of the time, once once a young player can do what you can do, which that's one of the reasons that Nelson stuck around, because there's not very many people getting hit home runs like he did.
Right.
But you just, it fiscally, it makes sense, even though it's not popular in the clubhouse and it's not popular in the fan base.
Yeah. And I of course, there is the other thing too, and we'll delve into this on a future episode, but there is the whole thing of, it's not just haves and have-nots. I mean, we're talking about real haves and genuine have-nots. I mean, we're talking about guys that are getting $300, $400, $700 million contracts. I mean, there's a point where all of that is, I mean, and it's funny too, because You don't have it in football because guys don't play as long and guys just don't have as long of careers. You do kind of have it in basketball, but the big difference in basketball is there's only 10 guys, 12 guys, 15 guys on a team, that are playing. So it's a much smaller pool. Boy, in baseball though, when you see these guys getting these, and 11 years, I mean, with that one contract that I saw was the last year that was it Mookie Betts? I got 11 years, and I'm like, he's going to be 41.
Right.
When that contract, he's going to be 41 in the last year of his contract. What are you, crazy? I mean, that's just nuts. But hey, more power to him. If you can get it.
That's it. If you can get it, you can get somebody to give it to you. I'll tip my cap to you.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be back next week with a fresh pod brought to you by Bet Online. Dude, it's tournament time, by the way. Should mention, I noticed that the tournament is coming. You go Cougs. I'll raise up my three fingers for the Cougars. But it's betting time. If you are a gambling person, I am not personally. I once went to the craps table in Louisiana. For my wife was doing a story. She was writing for a magazine. We went down there. I lost $32 in 6 minutes and I never played again. So that's the extent of but if you are someone who likes
spender.
to, that's right. I'm like, this is going too fast. I can't do this. I would rather go eat and you spend my $33 on food. But if you are the gambling type, this is probably your favorite time of year because the tournament is bonkers. It's one of the most fun sporting events you can go to. So you can also catch me most Fridays. I'll be doing my 5-Minute Friday weekend updates. You can find this on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, obviously on YouTube. Give us a follow at Bleav in Astros on X and Instagram. You can find me at Jeff Balke. Mike, where can they find you online?
X, formerly known as Twitter, at Mike Stanton 29.
Nice. Excellent. So super easy to find both of us, and subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can keep up. I'll have the videos posted for everything. And thanks for leaving us all the reviews on Apple. Obviously, send your comments and questions. I love getting those. We've gotten some really good ones on the YouTube lately. I love the guy pointing out to me that Lance McCullers and Justin Verlander both had once said, "Oh, I'll be fine," and then suddenly weren't. It's like, wow, thanks for making me feel real freaked out about Jose Urquidy. Right. I really appreciate that. All right, thanks everybody. It's beautiful outside. Go enjoy the weather, and as always, go Astros.